Welcome to Story Corner. I'm still kind of getting used to the new surroundings. But today I'm going to tell you one of the first Scottish folk stories that I ever heard. Now, it's one I've shared before, but only ever written down, and I think this is a story that deserves to be told. We start on the Isle of Islay, Scotland's west coast, where a blacksmith and his teenage son worked hard together in their forge every day. The boy was a hard worker, and carrying the raw metal and pumping the bellows was starting to build up those muscles. Safe to say, his father was very proud of how he was coming along. Then one day, out of nowhere, the boy fell mysteriously ill. Suddenly, he was incapable of leaving his bed, and even though he still had a ravenous appetite, he seemed to be getting weaker and weaker as the days passed. With no sign of recovery, the smith was distraught at the thought of losing his only son. Then, as luck would have it, news reached the forge that a wise old traveller had arrived in the village, and the smith wasted no time in seeking his advice. Now, that wise man nodded gravely as he heard the story and the boy's symptoms. With a grim look in his face, he informed the blacksmith that wasn't his son lying in the bed back home. It was a fairy changeling. In Scotland, it's well known that fairies steal children away to their kingdom, leaving an identical fairy impostor as a replacement to get weaker until it seemingly died. Usually it was newborns, but for some reason they'd taken an interest in this hard-working teenager. It wasn't always easy to spot a changeling, and the blacksmith kind of scoffed at the wise man's diagnosis. However, there was one trick that would hopefully convince him of the truth, and if there was even the slightest chance it could help, he was going to do it. And that's how this stern, rational blacksmith found himself pouring water into dozens of empty eggshells, and then carrying them through to the bedroom as if they weighed as much as his anvil, before carefully arranging them around on his floor. As he carried out these instructions, the figure in the bed burst out laughing, and it shouted, "In all my 800 years, I've never seen anything as strange as that." Now, well, I was certain this was a fairy changeling. The smith strode quickly across the floor, picked it up, and he launched it into the burning fire, and it shot up and away through the chimney with a high-pitched yelp. That was a good start, but the smith wasn't finished yet. He was still determined to get his child back. So he returned to the wise man for more advice. He was told to go to a nearby hill that same night, the one superstitious folks said was a fairy mound, and there he would find an entrance to the fairy kingdom. If he wanted to ensure he could leave again with his son, he was to bring with him a Bible, a wee knife, and a cockerel. And as the blacksmith approached the hill, right enough, he saw shining lights spilling out over the hillside and the sound of music coming from a strange opening. Before passing into the fairy realm, he stabbed a knife into the ground to stop the entrance from closing up behind him. And then, holding the Bible out as protection, he marched through the growing crowd of fairies, all staring at this curious intruder, who was brave enough to march right in unannounced. He found his son there as he'd hoped, slaving away over the forge, not even acknowledging his presence. Through tears of joy and a growing rage at the kidnapping, the smith demanded that the fairies let him leave there with his boy. That was too much for the gathered crowd of fairies to take, but they didn't attack. No, they just started to shriek with laughter. But all the sound of that laughing, that just woke up the cockerel, and it started crowing over and over again at them. I won't do an impression, you know what I mean. The sound was like fingernails on a blackboard to fairies, so while they covered her ears, the blacksmith picked up his son and he ran as fast as he could out into the fresh air. He plucked a wee knife out of the ground as he passed, and the hillside, shoom, suddenly went dark and quiet behind him. It took the boy a long time to recover from his ordeal. He wouldn't talk for weeks. Remember, it might have seemed like just a few days in the mortal world, but time moves differently under the hill. It had been months, or maybe even years for him down there. Until one day, as the blacksmith was struggling while forging a sword fit for a clan chief, the boy approached quietly. With a sigh, he pushed his father aside and the pair swapped places. The old man started working the bellows, acting as an apprentice. And in no time, they had crafted the most elegant blade that Islay had ever seen. Seems as if the son had maybe picked up a few tricks during his time trapped in the fairy kingdom. /